All right, everybody. Sorry we're late. We had a little restart on the computer. I'm Chad with Turner's Warehouse. This is Dane, back again.
Yes, back for another demo.
Welcome back to number 2.
Thank you.
If you're in the chat and have a question, feel free to ask it. Amy's moderating, and then we'll ask your questions to Dane as they come along. We also have a live audience. You guys want to cheer? There's like 300 or 400 of them, so
Yeah.
we'll keep them quiet.
Big room.
But Dane, we'll just let you take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming back.
Yes, absolutely. Love to be here. So I ended up forgetting the blank that I was going to turn today at my house before I drove all the way here. And it's about a 40-minute drive. So we're going to make do with what Chad has. And he has this beautiful little half log. Probably came from a branch of mesquite. It's mesquite?
Yeah, it's mesquite. Yep.
But it's going to make a beautiful bowl. And then to make up for having a really small blank, I'm also going to turn a bigger bowl. And we'll see how far we get. But this shouldn't take very long. And yeah, so let's get started. And now talking a few things before we get started, I'm going to be roughing this down with a 1/2-inch spindle gouge. And this particular spindle gouge has about a 45, a little bit closer to 40-degree angle on the end of it. And it's got 2 even wings. It's a fingernail grind. And I freehand sharpen. So the bevel, the angle isn't perfect, and I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I know it's somewhere around 40, 45 degrees. And then starting off, I'm going to put this between centers so that we can adjust the wings of the bowl. So I'm just going to eyeball the middle on each side, and we'll go from there. I'll go from there, should say. So that's the middle in this plane. And then in this plane, that looks pretty good to me. So I'll lock the tail center, and then I'm going to align this like I was talking about from the top side. So I want this plane to be completely perpendicular to the lathe axis, which it's pretty much there right now, but I'm going to get a better idea of that as I turn, and then because it's between centers, I can adjust it as I go. So I'll tighten this up, and the bark isn't gone, so I'm going to try and spin some of that off right now. Otherwise, it's going to do that when the lathe is on, which is not ideal. Ideally, I would have chiseled a piece off and gotten to the real wood before I put it on. That looks like it should be pretty good. Decent hold. And it's a pretty oblong piece, so we're going to have a lot of corner to take off here. But it'll be a good opportunity to practice some of these cuts that move through the air. So again, tighten it up one more time, lock the quill, and put my glasses on, and then we'll get going. The idea here is to use pull cuts using the left wing of the spindle gouge to try and squeeze my way through the timber here, because we're cutting a lot of air. I'm cutting a lot of air as this comes around. So instead of having the tool here and moving it freely like this, trying to sweep it through, it's going to want to knock it around. So I'm going to have my hand planted on the rest, and I'm going to have the tool right above my hip, and I'm going to hold it by the ferrule and just sweep my hips through and pivot it, squeezing motion with my hand as I'm pivoting my hip to the right. And that's going to push the edge through and sweep it right through the wood and hopefully give us a stable cut. Give me a stable cut. So, make sure everything's good. Tool rest is actually a bit low. Another thing is the tool rest height. I want to be cutting at center or slightly above center. It's a pretty small piece. I'm going to spin it up to about 900 RPMs, a little bit under that. And so it's spinning on you see it's spinning on the drive there. It's because of the bark. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that off and try and get some of the bark out so it stops doing that.
You want a little chisel or something?
That'd be perfect. what'll happen is the bark will gum up the drive and it won't be able to push itself in any further and grab something that's actually going to give it some bite. It's just going to act more like a drill than a drive. Thank you, sir. So I'll just come in and try and lever some of this out. It's not advisable to try and push real hard to push towards your finger. Of course, if you slip, you're going to cut yourself, but let's try and work some of this bark off, get to some actual wood underneath.
That mesquite bark is tight.
Oh yeah, rough stuff. It seems pretty dry too. How long has this stuff been sitting for?
You're probably four or 5 months out, but it was sealed.
It's
so
sealed, yeah.
It's going to be pretty nice to turn, but not super dry.
Yeah, perfect. No, I love working air-dried timber, especially opposed to kiln-dried stuff. It's way less powdery. But that should be a little bit better. And I still have the original hole in the center there from the drive, so it just goes right back on. And then the same hole from the spike. And that should drive it a bit better. But of course, I will see if it does. And the reason I'm wearing a glove here is to protect this part of my hand right here. And I've taken the fingers off to try and help, because you don't want to, it's not advisable to wear a glove with any sort of spinning object, any power tool, anything like that, because it can get caught and wrapped up and you can get your hand wrapped up in there. But a lot of these chips get really sharp and they can come off, and I've had my hand start bleeding right here, so I wear a fingerless glove just to prevent that. I'm also coming through and taking the corner off first, because that's going to help get rid of the oscillation and get me to a place where I'm shaping a bit quicker as well. And that's the problem too with the drive, is that if you go too aggressively, it'll still want to spin, and it'll get gummed up. And that has come, I forgot to check the alignment on that, so it's at an angle right now, and we want that to be straight so that the wings are even. So I'm actually going to pull the tail center out, and then I'll take this off too and try and get rid of some of the stuff in there. I don't think the bark is going to stay on. I usually never keep the bark on pieces like this, knowing that from experience, like long term, the bark wants to come off if it's a piece that you're using all the time. So it's getting washed up, it's getting touched, it's getting used for whatever. More utilitarian pieces you want to leave the bark off of, because it's not a good look when it does end up coming off and it's not in your hands anymore. That should be better. I could probably give it a little more speed now too. It's running at 1100. And what I'm going to try and do now that it's spun a bunch on me, I'm going to try and get a foot on it as soon as I can, and then I'm going to grip it, flip it around, and then attach it through by a mortise as opposed to a drive. scraping cut coming back on the face grain. I have dividers set somewhere, these dividers. So these are dividers that are set to the exact diameter of my chuck jaws for the standard jaws on one of my chucks. And I'm going to use this, I'm going to hold it and use the left point to mark, and I want it to line up with the right point. And I'm only using the left point to mark. And so now I have a line that I'm going to work my way down to, and I'm going to leave a little bit around that line so that I can come back when we remount it on the other, when I remount it on the other side, and do the final diameter of the foot. So now that I have a tenon or a foot that I can grab, I can try and do some more outside shaping, and if it spins, I'll just turn it around. And you hear the bark flapping around coming off. And I'm not going all the way through up through the other side because I don't want to risk breaking out some of that fragile face grain on the top and the bark as well. Which the bark's going to end up coming off anyway, but so now I'm just using the right wing, doing largely the same thing that I was with the left, but instead of sweeping my hips to the right, I'm sweeping them to the left, and I can have more of my body weight behind the tool. Let's see how that's looking. So we're getting there, and this mesquite bark is very stringy and likes to come off. Woods like Arizona ash, if you ever work some of that stuff, that bark will stay on. And that is bark that I do leave on consistently sometimes because it does not want to come off. It really doesn't. We're not perfectly aligned on the top, but we can have a little bit of play when I come back and do the mortise on the other side. So this is pretty good for right now. So I'll take this off and then put the 4-jaw chuck on. Which, do you have a whammy bar or a little?
Yes. Right here.
Sweet, thank you. Where does this live at? Lives over there?
Whammy. Yeah, I can go anywhere.
Perfect.
Dane, people are really glad you're back. Thanks for coming back.
Yes, I was super stoked to come back. Super, super stoked. I love doing this stuff. It was a blast last time. It was crazy. This time, a little less nervous.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, feels good. This is a little key that I made for the chuck. It's a little bit short. I'd like to have a longer one, but this is what I had. So this is an 8mm Allen wrench. And I can use that to open the chuck a little bit more, open and close the jaws a little bit faster than if I had the normal